Hey everybody, it's Callie, and today I want to talk about some of the things that OCD took from me, but also, and maybe more importantly, how I got them back. So before I get into those things, there's something that I've said a million times, and I'll say it again because it's something that I think people really need to hear and understand, and that's OCD isn't something that you just cure like that and you never think about it again. It's something that you maintain and you just work through, and that maintenance comes with time and experience and work and a lot of effort and sometimes just the pure gumption of saying, no, I'm gonna get better and I'm going to get through this. But going forward with that in mind, I've talked a little bit before about some of the big things that I didn't let OCD take from me. And one of those things I think is something that it must have been some kind of subconscious force because I really was not conscious of it at the time. But I had this determination. It's just like survival instinct, I guess. Even if you're, again, not on a conscious level, you see the larger picture and you say, someday this is going to get better. Someday I'm not going to feel like this anymore. These feelings aren't going to last forever. Again, I really wasn't conscious of that. It didn't feel like that, but I just had to go with this blind trust that things would get better. So like I said, though, I didn't always think I was going to make it out. And before I knew what I was experiencing had a name, before I knew that it was OCD, remember this was years ago. Trigger warning here, it's a little bit of a sensitive topic, but it needs to be said because I know that other people have felt this way. I really thought that I was going to have to die to make it stop. And again, maybe that feels dramatic, maybe that sounds a little bit out there, but I started thinking, maybe I can't find people talking about it because people don't live to talk about it. Maybe people don't make it through. That was just a sign of the times. People were not really talking about things online that way. I was finding very little about what I was going through, and having had bad experiences with doctors, not really knowing what was going on until I found somebody who did. I really thought that I was alone, that I was the only person, again, that was experiencing this, that was living through this, that was trying to make it through. So that's, again, even though it is a kind of sensitive topic, and like I said, I wanted to put a trigger warning there. If I felt it, I know that other people have felt it, and I've heard of other people talking about it, and the more we talk about it, the more we find other people that have had that experience. And if there's one thing that I really want to be for somebody, to be that person that I was looking for, that I needed to hear talk about an experience that I had in a way that just is very frank and that I could relate to, because it was hard. And luckily, I've said it before, we are living in a time where we have the internet at our fingertips and we can find other people, we can talk more freely with people. There's a little bit less stigma around these kinds of things, so we can talk more openly. And that is something that I'm so grateful for, because I think really it's saving lives. It truly is, because I thought that I was going to have to die for this to get better. And here I am, very much alive as a living testament that you can get through it and it does get better. So going back, as my bad days with OCD turned into bad weeks and bad months, OCD was really seeping into pretty much every aspect of my life. It was in my relationships. I didn't want to see my friends and above all my family and like my pets, because my family and pets are what I hold dearest to me. And many of us have heard and learned through experience that OCD tends to latch itself onto what we hold closest to us. And for me, that was my relationship with my family and having my pets and all of that stuff. So I distanced myself big time from a lot of my relationships with friends, family. My OCD brain was telling me that I had to keep them safe, and the only way that I could do that was to not be around them, to distance myself and keep myself separate. Because of my harm OCD specifically, I thought that no matter what, I was a danger to them. I'm not even going to bring in like forget romantic relationships for me, because that was something that I couldn't even think about. It was just fortunate at this time that I was not in some kind of relationship, because of course that would have suffered as well. So it was a long time before I could even think of entering that kind of relationship again. And my heart goes out to anybody that is in that kind of relationship and experiencing that OCD with their partner. I have had those kinds of things come up, but fortunately I knew what it was at that point. Going back to all this, like the very beginning, I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to deal with it. So when those OCD things came up later in relationships, I was able to more, I guess, appropriately manage how I was reacting to my thoughts, and you know, I was just kind of in better footing there. But at that point in the very beginning, I couldn't even think about ever having another kind of relationship with another person like that. It just wasn't, I thought, never going to be on the table ever. So at this point, my OCD was robbing me of relationships, and then I stopped consuming like the media that I liked. I had always been very into true crime, or I was always like a horror movie fan. I couldn't even fathom any of those kinds of topics. I couldn't even watch the news because unfortunately the world can be a very dark place, and I feel like sometimes we are just bombarded with bad news or violence or just these awful things. And so I was avoiding watching TV, I was avoiding watching the news, and I wasn't enjoying the things that I used to enjoy. So I think when we're talking about mental health, that's kind of a red flag, right? When you're not enjoying the things that you usually find pleasure in. I stopped doing my hobbies because I was just so sick and exhausted, and anytime I tried to do something, like let's say I tried to paint or something, my mind while I was painting was going a mile a minute while I was working, saying, oh, you're just doing this to distract yourself from something that you're gonna be compelled to do, some bad thing that you secretly want to do, and you're just denying that you want to do it. Those things just became exhausting. And then my physical health started to suffer because I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I lost a lot of weight. But like the weight that you lose when you're sick because you can't eat is like, it was very tough. I had no energy. I couldn't even stomach like a protein shake or something like that. I would take a few sips and immediately feel sick. On one hand, I couldn't keep up with like basic hygiene, but then on the other hand, I would spend so much time in my safe places, which one of them was the shower, because for some reason in my OCD brain, nothing bad could happen while I was in the shower. I wasn't doing compulsions. I know that some people get stuck in a routine when they're in the shower and it takes longer and longer and longer each time, and you're finding yourself in the shower for, you know, hours or whatever it is a day. I didn't have that. I just felt stuck in the shower because for some reason in my brain, nothing bad was going to happen. I was safe from everybody else and everybody was safe from me while I was in the shower. So I would feel the need to stay in the shower. The water would be ice cold by the time I got out, and it was only at that point and I feel like I was waiting for the water to heat up again, and then I would want to go back in. So that was something that you know, became a problem. So I was spending so much time and so much energy and sacrificing my health for my OCD, to try and accommodate my OCD. And then something that I don't really talk about very often, and I don't know that I've ever actually talked about it online, but I developed a little bit of a spending problem. That was when I started to get better. And I say get better like that because I wasn't really getting better. I was just trading one compulsion for another when I started to do that. So I was compulsively buying things online so that I would have something to look forward to as I waited for them to get to me. It sounds very silly, but I guess my warped feeling in that was, I'm not gonna be around for very much longer and I don't have anything to look forward to. So at least while I'm waiting for packages, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to those packages arriving. So that way I felt like I had something to live for, because I thought that, again, my life as I knew it was over. I thought that I was never going to be a functioning member of society again. I thought that I was never going to have a normal life, normal relationships with people. I was giving myself something to live for. Which actually now when I think about it is kind of funny, because I think anybody who knows me in person knows that I'm a pretty frugal person. So that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I was so desperate to have a feeling of, okay, I'm living for this thing, or this little tiny kernel of joy that waiting for a package or spending money gave me. That's where my OCD took me. So I've talked about mental and physical health, my relationships, my money, all these things that OCD took from me. And one of the things, going back to the things that I didn't let it take, the one that stands out above all others in my mind is when I got into grad school. I had this, pretty unique experience where I got the opportunity to go to the other side of the world on a full scholarship with a living stipend. And looking back, I think that would have been harrowing for anybody, OCD or not, because it's such an upheaval of your life and your routine and everything that you know, and your language and everything. Also, going back to one of the topics of one of my other videos about trusting your gut, had I trusted my OCD gut, I wouldn't have gone. I didn't want to go. I was leaving everything I knew. God, when I think about it, I knew the city that I was going to, and I knew the school that I was going to, and I knew who was picking me up at the airport. That was all I knew. I didn't know what my living situation was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to be living in a dorm. I didn't know if I was going to have roommates. I didn't know literally anything. That's now crazy thinking about, but I guess in my 20s, I was like, well, if I don't do this, I'm never gonna have this opportunity again. I knew that I had to listen to my real gut, which said, you're never going to get this opportunity again. There's never going to be another chance to do something like this. And if you miss this opportunity, you are going to regret it for the rest of your life. And I'm really grateful that I let my real gut take over and I didn't listen to my OCD gut, because I would have missed out on that opportunity. But I mean, granted, I definitely crashed out shortly after getting there, and I had major issues with my OCD when I got there, because like I said, it was a total upheaval of everything that I knew, every routine that I had. The stress of moving or the stress of a new life event is a lot for people, whether they have OCD or not. But I think with OCD, it can kind of trigger a lot of things for you. So glad that at that point, I already kind of had the understanding of how OCD worked and how to go about helping myself with that, because I just had at that point learned how to exist with my OCD, exist with my obsessions, and how to manage my compulsions a little bit, because that would have been that much harder if I didn't know. And I don't know that without having the experience of having gone through ERP, or exposure and response prevention, I don't know that I would have gone. And again, I know that that would have been something that I would have always regretted that. So ERP, as scary as I know that can be, for me, it was instrumental in understanding that I could still do what I wanted to do. I was still capable of doing these things despite what my OCD was telling me, despite that it was telling me I was gonna be this person that I was really afraid to be. I knew that I could still live in spite of all that. I could still do these things like move to the other side of the world, something really outlandish. And then I could also do these everyday things like maintain my health, or maintain my spending habits, or maintain my relationships with people. That is what ERP taught me. So if any of this sounds like an experience that you have had or are having, it might be time to start to look into ERP for yourself, and that's something that you can do with NOCD. If you would like to talk to a therapist that, definitely knows a thing or two about OCD and how to treat it with ERP, and is going to be there to walk you through those steps, you can go to NOCD.com or treatmyocd.com today to talk to somebody. So on that note, I'm going to get going, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.